Hi, I'm Christy and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm here to chat about all of the recent books that I am absolutely obsessed with. Alright, so last year I did a video every quarter of the year where I would talk about all of my 5-star reads for the year. So this year I kind of wanted to do something similar, highlight my favorites, but kind of do it in a different way. So I decided to just kind of do it when the list got long enough to talk about some of them. And so this is going to be all of my favorites from January and February. And this I'm also going to include rereads I've done as well as my 4.5-star reads because I know I'm a picky reader and so sometimes I don't always give every book I read 5 stars. I'm definitely somebody who uses the full scale of the Goodreads star rating, so not every book to me is 5 stars. I know I'm a picky critical reader. I'm just a picky critical person in general, like with movies and shows I watch as well. So I wanted to include my 4.5-star reads as well because obviously I loved those too. So I actually have 15 to share today. I'm so excited to gush about all of these though. Of course, as always, if you ever want to see more of my thoughts or my full reviews on any of the books that I do read, I review every book I read, and you can always get to my book reviews on Goodreads, which is linked in the description of the video. All of my videos always have that. I also will link every book I talk about as well down there. So if you miss a book, want to go back and see what book, what author I was talking about, they'll all be linked below as well. So let's get into it. So we're just going in order of when I read them. So my first 5-star read of the year was First Time Caller by B.K. Borison. I just got this one in recently. This was the Walmart exclusive edition. So this is just a different colorway. It's purple with the metallic purple for the title. So stinking cute. I love the purple. I had an early copy of it and was so excited to dive in. I loved this book to pieces. So this one is Sleepless in Seattle inspired, and it definitely gave those vibes. In this one, the hero is a radio host for a romance hotline, and he has kind of recently fallen out of love, which is kind of a bad problem when his job is to talk about love, talk about dating advice. And so he's kind of just feeling out of it when one night he gets a call from this young girl who's calling in for her mother, and she is basically saying, you know, I need dating advice for my mom. She needs to get out there and find a date. And so the mom overhears, joins in on the conversation. And so that conversation between the hero and the heroine ends up going viral. And basically the radio show that he works for, as well as just the people of Baltimore, they're like, we need more. Like, these two need to be on the air. You need to help her out, find her a date. And so it becomes a little segment of the show where he's trying to help her find a date. The hero in this is the cutest, sweetest thing ever. And you can tell he definitely wants her. She's a single mom. She's also a car mechanic. So I loved that. Very much just like sweet romantic vibes. It was everything I ever wanted. I love B.K. Borison's books. So this one just felt like a warm hug. I loved it so much. All right, next is Mine Till Midnight by Lisa Kleypas. This is a historical romance. This is the first book in the Hathaways series. Absolutely obsessed with the blue and gold. And then of course we have the step back here as well. This is for Cam and Emilia Hathaway. This is a reread for me. It's one of my favorite Lisa Kleypas series. I'm currently a co-host for a Hathaways series read along. And so this is the first book in the series. I love it to pieces, love it so much. Basically in here, the Hathaways family, Emilia is the oldest daughter of the family. And so their brother recently found out that he has inherited a title and a family home. And so she has to go and find her brother. So he is a bit of a hot mess and has kind of disappeared. So she needs to go and find him and kind of pull him back up and take him to their family home as well as her younger sisters. Along the way, when she's trying to find her brother, she runs into the hero who works at a gaming hell. And so he decides, you know what, I'm super intrigued by this independent woman who thinks she can just go wherever she wants in London to find her brother. Like, I need to go with her and join up. So Cam and Emilia end up going to find her brother. And then it kind of goes from there with the family eventually moving to the estate that they have inherited. And it needs a lot of fixing up, things like that. And then the hero Cam is just so intrigued by Emilia and has to be around her all the time. Love this one to pieces. So good. Cam and Emilia are everything and more. Highly recommend the Hathaways if you haven't started the series yet. All right, next up is Protect by Paisley Hope. So this is the second book in the Skyridge Hotshots series. So this was a collab series that 3 authors ended up having 3 books that were all part of the same series following these wildfire firefighters. And so this is the second book in the series. This was my favorite in the series. So this book is a second chance with a single mom. The hero in here, he is one of the wildfire firefighters, and so he was also her brother's best friend. Her brother has since passed away. So the hero and the heroine knew one another for years. They had a little bit of a moment back in high school, and so we see flashbacks of that in the series. And then in current day, the heroine is a nurse, and she's also a single mom to her daughter. And so the hero is absolutely obsessed with her, and she ends up coming back to town and moving closer to her parents. She's around the hero again, and it kind of just goes from there. I love how sweet the hero is with the heroine as well as him with her daughter. daughter as well. So stinking cute. This one had me smiling so much with some of those interactions. It also has that suspense level with the firefighting as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. This is Protect by Paisley Hope. It's on Kindle Unlimited. All right, next up is a novella. So this is Signal Moon by Kate Quinn. This one is on Kindle Unlimited with the read and listen feature. So if you grab the ebook from Kindle Unlimited and you have it checked out, then you'll have the audiobook with it as well to listen to. I really enjoyed this one. This is a historical fiction novella. And so basically in here, I'll keep it kind of short because I think you should just go in for the ride and enjoy it. So in here, it is World War II, 1943. The heroine is a debutante, kind of a lady of society. So she kind of had to trade in all of her party gowns and get a job. So she works now and she intercepts naval communications and sends the messages on to Bletchley Park for them to translate or decipher. And so one night she is wearing her headphones, she is listening in to some naval communications, and she overhears this American guy on a ship, and he's talking about that his ship is on fire, it's going down, and she's shocked that nobody else is reporting on this or talking about it. So she tries to get him help, and along the way she ends up kind of being confused of what he's talking about. And so over time she has to figure out where he is, when he is possibly, and it kind of goes from there. Really enjoyed this one. A really just short novella on KU, and I loved that it came with the audiobook. It was such a good experience. All right, next up is another historical romance. So this is As You Desire by Connie Brockway. I'm obsessed with the kind of like coppery orange color of this cover. So here is the step back as well. This one was a lot of fun. This was my first time reading from this author. I read this for the Historical Hellions, the historical romance book club that I am a co-host for. This was, I believe, our January pick, and a lot of people had been recommending it to us. And this one was everything that people said. It was so good. This one does take place in Egypt, and it is Victorian Egypt, where the hero and the heroine both live in Egypt, and they are both friends who have kind of friend-zoned one another, but they're both very interested in each other, and they both have some things going on. So basically in here, the heroine was kind of a child prodigy, where her family took her around all over Europe and kind of just had her translate and learn languages. Like that was one of her skills when she was young, and so she never really had a proper childhood, and so she always dreams of going back to England and kind of just living that English countryside fantasy that is in her head. And so she's staying with her grandfather, but always just kind of dreams of going back to England. So the hero in here had a horrible childhood. He had dyslexia, which of course was not diagnosed or known what was happening to him at the time. And so he wasn't treated very nicely at all in school growing up. He has no dreams of ever returning to England. So he's just kind of living his best life and has found a job for himself in Egypt. So he knows that the heroine wants to return to England, and he knows that's never going to be a possibility for him. And so he kind of stays away from her. And then at the same time, the heroine tried to make a move on the hero in the past. He kind of shut her down because, of course, of the reasons I just said, and like he doesn't think he's worthy enough of her. So they did friend zone one another, but they're always in one another's lives and working together. And so now the hero's cousin ends up coming to town and is like, ooh, I'm kind of interested in the heroine. So the hero is like, absolutely not going to happen, and steps up his game. And I loved it so much. So good. Highly recommend checking it out. Totally worth the read. Next up is A Tropical Rebel Gets the Duke by Adriana Herrera. So this is the third book in her Las Leonas series. This series is now complete. This is a historical romance series. I did a pre-order for this one, so it came with this gorgeous art kind of step back moment as well. I'm obsessed with it. So this one takes place in the late, I want to say like 1880s in Paris, and the heroine in here is actually a doctor. So she's working for some underground abortion clinics in Paris in the late 1880s. So the hero in here is a Black Duke, so he has some things he's dealing with as well. And so he is very pulled into the heroine, absolutely obsessed with her and determined to kind of take care of her. She is very independent, and so he just wants to be a part of her life, take care of her at the end of the day, and kind of all of those things are in the kind of the same friend group. And so it kind of goes from there. I was obsessed with the couple in here and the way that he wanted to take care of her, and she is more independent, kind of doing her job. Definitely has some heavier content warnings because, like I said, what her job is and kind of entails. And so I love this one. Love how much the hero was obsessed with her and wanted to make it known to her. She kind of fights it for quite some time, but I had a good time with this one. Highly recommend this series. All right, and then we have Come Back by Rebecca Jenshak. This is the third book in the Holland Brothers series. I was obsessed with this one. Love it so much, and this is such a gorgeous cover. I love the foil on here and having the pop of the heroine character art on the back. Also, the interior has the colored in pages. Came with some character art that I got from the author. Absolutely obsessed with this one. So like I said, this is book 3 in the Holland Brothers series, and this has been a sports romance series. So in this one, the hero is a football player, and we met both of the characters in this book in the previous book, which was Playbook, my favorite in the series. So the hero is a football player, he is deaf, and he is also best friends with the heroine's brother, and he is a roommate of her brother as well. So the heroine's a dancer, she works at a dance club, and then she also is trying to open up her own dance studio, and so she ends up kind of needing a place to stay, and her brother invites her to stay at the apartment with him and the hero, and so she moves in with them. And so at first the hero's not really sure about her because she is kind of new into her brother's life, which you kind of saw play out in the previous book, and so he's worried that she's going to take off and hurt his best friend slash her brother's feelings, and so he just wants to make sure she's in it for the right reasons. And so eventually he realizes that she is there for all the right reasons, and he is very much into her as well, and it goes from there. I love in here how the heroine, she can communicate with him with ASL as well, and the heroine has asthma, so we see her have an asthma attack on the page. Just such a good one. I love how much these two were there for one another, and you can totally tell that they are meant to be. I love the caretaking between them. So sweet. Love this one. I'm just obsessed with this entire series by Rebecca Jenshak. They've all been 5 stars for me, so highly recommend. All right, next up is Unloved by Peyton Corinne. This is my favorite book so far of the entire year. I love this book to pieces. This book is a sports romance, but it also has such an emotional mental health representation as well. This is the follow-up to Unsteady, which I loved last year by this author. It was one of my favorite reads of 2024. So this is a college hockey romance where the hero in here is failing all of his classes. He has like a 2.0 GPA. He is very much struggling with dyslexia, dyscalculia, and ADHD as well, so it's affecting his grades. So he needs to get his grades up so he can graduate and eventually get some of those contracts he has going with the NHL. So he ends up getting a tutor who is the heroine, and she is very much the opposite of him. And we have seen this story before, but I swear to you, the way it's done in this book is so different and unique and just so sweet and special. Basically in here, the hero and the heroine, they both have always felt unloved, as the title suggests, kind of like that they're not perfect enough for anybody. They have kind of tried to change things about themselves to fit into roles or to please people. And so it's very much a book for people who have tried to please others in life and never feeling like you're worthy enough, that you're good enough. And so I just love the connection these two have. They're very much kind of giving like opposites vibes, but once they really get to know one another, they are so similar in the way that they think and the way that they feel love. And I love them to pieces. The mental health in here is done so stinking well. Like, Peyton Corinne is on another level. I highly recommend her books. Please pick this up. I cannot hear anything bad about this book though, so I will let you know that ahead of time. I love this one to pieces. Like I said, my favorite read of the entire year so far. All right, next up is Devotion by Claire Kent. So if you have been following me for a while, you know I love Claire Kent's post-apocalyptic romances. So this is a new series from her, but I highly recommend reading her Kindled series first, which is the post-apocalyptic series. It will all make sense once you jump into this book. So this one is a dystopian. It's an age gap. It has a transactional relationship. Basically, this is like near future Earth where something happened, post-apocalyptic type of setting happened to Earth, and the society, the governments, kind of all the things shut down, and they are now rebuilding. So in here, there is this new capital and a palace along with it. And so the heroine in here is a palace partner, which kind of sounds exactly how it is. Basically, in her world, in the capital where she lives, it is looked at as something highly esteemed and respected, where her whole job is to be a partner, a companion to a delegate that works at the palace, where she's basically there for whatever they want from her. And so just kind of make them feel good in any way that is, like she does. So in here, she ends up getting partnered up with the hero. He is new to the city, and he's very much having culture shock because where he comes from, this is not a thing, and he's seen it as like degrading and disrespectful, and he's like, I would never take somebody like that to have as a companion and pay them for doing that for me. So they're like, oh no, you have to do this to take your job. Like, you have to pick somebody. So he just like looks around the room and picks the heroine from his options. And so at first he wants like nothing to do with her. He's like, just stay in your corner of the room. I'm not going to ask anything from you. And of course she's feeling bad because she's like, I'm not doing my job right. Like, I'm supposed to be taking care of him, and he's supposed to be being comforted by me and kind of making his job easier to have like a release. So eventually she ends up keep offering it to him, and he eventually gives in and decides to go with it. And of course some feelings go from there, and it kind of just is a very much slow burn build. I love the characters in here, love the whole setup. This entire world is just so interesting, and I love being swept up by Claire Kent's books. Highly recommend getting to it. This is Devotion, the first book in the Central Cities series, but like I said, please go and read the Kindled series first. You will not regret it. All right, and then next up we have Isola by Allegra Goodman. I don't have a copy of this one, but I need to get it because I love this one. This is a historical fiction, takes place in the 1500s, so like the mid 1500s. And here we're following a girl in France who was born into a noble family. Her mother actually died during childbirth, and her father eventually passes away when she's like 3. I think her father's away fighting for the king at the time. So the heroine is still a young child, and she gets assigned a guardian who comes and kind of takes over all of her money because she's an heiress. She owns a chateau, she owns a ton of land, but she has no idea because she's a child. And so the guardian of hers kind of comes in and decides to use all of the money that she's supposed to have and use it to fund his own expeditions. Like he fancies himself an explorer and kind of does a lot of that. So eventually the heroine is kind of like an older teen, and he ends up taking her with him on one of his expeditions. He is planning to sail from France over to New France, which is the New World, Canada at present day time. And so it is like 1540s, 1550s. So she's sailing with him and his entire crew, and she ends up forming a connection, a little love moment with one of the cabin boys on board. And so the guardian of hers finds out and is so disgusted by them. So he ends up leaving the heroine and her new lover on an island out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And so it kind of goes from there with a lot of like survival, and it's actually based on true people as well, which was wild to me. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. Definitely recommend checking it out if you want a historical fiction with like survival and just like the strength of a woman's story. Just like, ugh, so empowering. Next up is On Love Rose Lane by Samantha Young. So this is a limited arc edition that I was sent by the author. I love this one. This is a follow-up to the Dublin Street series that the author wrote back in like the 2010s. I was obsessed with that series back then, and I was so excited when this new spin-off second generation series was announced. This one has some gorgeous character art as well that came with the book. So like I said, this is the start of a second generation story. So in here, the heroine, her parents had a book, and so now it is her time many years later. And so in here, this is a second chance as well with the hero and the heroine. They knew one another in high school. He was kind of like from the wrong sides of the track, so to speak, where he didn't have any money, but he was at her school for like, I think like a sports scholarship or something. And so the heroine was from a very wealthy family. She was very much well off, and her family was just established in the community. And so he had felt that he was never worthy of her, even when they were children in high school. And then the heroine ended up pulling away for reasons that you see explored in the book. And so it kind of like cemented his feelings of what he felt, that he wasn't good enough for her. So now it's many years later, and they end up meeting again, where he is now a famous like professional footballer. So he plays soccer, and where he ends up moving into her building. And so she kind of just can't get away from him, and she's very pulled to him, and they have to do this like fake relationship for reasons, for her job. And it kind of goes from there with them kind of discovering what pulled them away from each other all those years ago. This one has amazing mental health rep in here. The heroine has anxiety and panic attacks. I love when a hero feels like he's not worthy of the heroine, and then of course being proven wrong. Love that so much. It's like one of my catnip tropes. I really enjoyed this one. I love their connection and the mental health aspects of it. I feel like we're done so well. I just really connected to the story emotionally. So yeah, I love this one. Highly recommend checking it out. Next up is Seduce Me at Sunrise by Lisa Kleypas. So this is the second book in the Hathaways series. Obsessed with the red and gold in here, and then we have the gorgeous step back moment as well. This one is for Kevin Wynn. So this is book 2 in the Hathaways series. Like I said, I have been rereading the series because I am a co-host for a read-along. This book is one of my favorite Lisa Kleypas books, so I was absolutely thrilled to reread it. This has amazing mutual pining and longing and angst between characters. Basically in here, the hero and the heroine have been raised around one another. The hero actually worked for the heroine's family, and so he has always felt unworthy of the heroine, which, I mean, similar to my previous book. Like I said, it's one of my favorite like subtropes. So the heroine has been going through things as well. She has always been sick. She had some sicknesses when she was growing up, and so she's still affected by those. And so she's kind of looked at as frail, and everybody's very worried and just treats her very like precious all the time. And so she is wanting to just live her life, have the hero, have him just like take her in his arms. But of course, he is always just like afraid he'll break her, afraid he's not worthy enough. So it kind of goes from there, where the heroine goes away for 2 years to France to get better, and she ends up coming back, and her doctor comes back with her, and her doctor is a little bit intrigued and interested in her, and so the hero is like absolutely not. And so it kind of goes from there. I love these two to pieces. Definitely that soulmates, fated vibe to their romance. So good. Like the mutual pining, the angst, So good. Love this one to pieces. Highly recommend the Hathaways series. Next up is My Darling Mayhem by Ashley Munoz. So this is a standalone from this author. It recently just released. This is an MC romance, small town. The heroine's a single mom. The hero falls first. He is an MC president who is trying to change up his life because he wants to become the guardian for his younger brother. And so he is living in the small town where the heroine lives because he's trying to get away from his MC kind of lifestyle and show the courts that he is going to be capable of taking care of his brother. And so the heroine, at the same time, she comes from a dangerous background as well and some family ties to something. And so she is also wanting to just get away from that lifestyle and take care of her young son. And so she's living next door to the hero, very intrigued by him, but she also knows that is like everything she tried to escape from. So she kind of is a little wary. It doesn't say nice things to him in the beginning, but over time they are just pulled to one another because they are neighbors. His younger brother and her son are in the same kindergarten class, so they kind of can't escape one another. And it goes from there. This one does have connections to this author's Stone Riders MC series, but it actually really has connections to her Rakeforge series, which I need to go back and read because I'm so intrigued by that series. Some of the characters in here have books in that series, and so it was just so good. It's a standalone, single mom. They are so pulled to one another, and I love how much the hero is just such a cinnamon roll and wants to take care of her, but is also like she's giving him all of those feelings and validating that he is unsafe, there's no security, and so kind of validating all of his feelings that he feels about himself. And so kind of goes from there. I was obsessed with these two. It has romantic suspense elements towards the end of the book. So good. It just came out in the end of February. Highly recommend. All right, and then next up is His Tesoro by Emilia Rossi. I need to get a physical copy of this one because the cover is absolutely stunning. So I recently read this one. It was on my TBR since last year. I know so many friends who loved it, and then I just never got to it before the end of the year. And then I found out that it was getting an audiobook release in February. So I was like, this is the perfect time to get to this book. And I'm so glad I did. It was so good. This is a mafia romance, and it definitely gave me like old school mafia romance vibes, like from a few years back, just that obsessed way I felt about them. This book had totally all of those vibes. This one is age gap and arranged marriage. It also has disability rep in here. The heroine is a wheelchair user. She also has mobility aids that she uses as well. So basically in here, the heroine lived in Chicago her whole life. Her father was a part of the mafia, and she very much had that typical like isolated mafia daughter vibe of like she never got out of her own house, let alone the city. And so her father, for reasons, ends up doing an arranged marriage with the hero, who is the head of all of the like 5 families in New York. And so they come and get married. That's the first time they meet. And so they get married, and the hero immediately sweeps her away to New York. And so he kind of realizes that she wasn't taken care of very well, and he immediately wants to just take care of her. And it is so good. I was obsessed with these two. He kind of tries to keep away from her for a bit, but you can tell like he just has to give in. Love these two together so much. I love the heroine. It has like Grumpy Sunshine vibes. It's age gap, arranged marriage mafia. Highly recommend. I cannot wait for book 2. It recently got a kind of like release date. I think it's coming out in April, and I can't wait. All right, and then the last one I have is Scythe and Sparrow by Bryn Weaver. This is a Barnes & Noble exclusive edition. I love the foil on here, and I had to grab it because it came with a step back moment as well. It has a raccoon on here, which if you read the story, everything will make sense. This is the 3rd and final book in the Ruinous Love trilogy, and honestly the whole series was like a 4-star read for me. I always had a good time, a good enough time with them, but this book kind of blew me away. It's my favorite in the series. I loved it so stinking much. So in this one, the heroine is a circus performer, and she's also a serial killer who ends up taking out men who are doing wrong to women. And so in here, she actually ends up getting an injury at the beginning of the story, and so she's been a part of the circus since she was 15, and her boss basically tells her, hey, you need to like sit it out and relax and recoup and get better. So you need to stay in the small town while we kind of go and continue on, just so you can heal up. So she ends up moving in with the hero, who was a doctor in the small town, and it kind of goes from there with the forced proximity, the roommates situation. I was obsessed with these two and loved it so much. These are like dark romance, kind of like dark comedy vibes. They just work really well for me. They're very like witty, which is what I appreciate in comedy. The hero in here as well, he has connections to the entire series because his 2 brothers are the heroes of the other books in the series, and so all of those other couples make appearances in this one. It was just so good. It wraps up the whole series really, really well, but also kind of leaves it a little open-ended where there might possibly be some other characters, new series in the future, so I'm excited for that. I love this one. Like I said, it kind of took me by surprise because I wasn't expecting mean to love it as much as I did, but I'm so glad I got to it. It was so good. The audiobook in particular was fantastic. So highly recommend Scythe and Sparrow. All right, so those are my 15 recent favorite books that I am absolutely obsessed with and highly recommend you checking out. All of my 4.5 and 5-star reads so far for the year. Definitely let me know in the comments what your favorites have been so far for the year. If you've read any of the books that I talked about, I'd love to know, or if you're gonna pick any of them up as well, I would love to know that as well. If you'd rather leave me an emoji in the comments today to let me know that you watched this video, leave me the circus tent emoji because we have to go with the circus vibes for Scythe and Sparrow. So leave me a circus tent. If you haven't done so yet, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my future videos, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!